Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Horizon and watched the green world below through the main screen. New Haven looked perfect from space with its blue oceans and white clouds swirling around the continents. 3 months ago, 50,000 humans had landed on this world to start a new life among the stars. The colony was growing well, and the people were happy. Jake felt proud of what they had built here. Dr. Lisa Carter walked up to him with a data pad in her hands. She looked excited about something. Lisa was the best scientist Jake had ever worked with, and she knew more about alien life than anyone else on the ship. "Jake, we just got some interesting readings from the long-range sensors," she said. "There are ships coming our way from the outer system." Commander Rick Davis turned from his station. Rick was a tough military man who had served in the Earth Defense Force for 15 years. "How many ships and what kind?" he asked. His voice was calm, but Jake could see the worry in his eyes. They were far from Earth and had no backup if trouble came their way. "The computer says there are 12 large vessels," Lisa replied. "They don't match any human designs we know about. The ships are bigger than ours and made from materials our sensors can't identify." She paused and looked at both men. "I think we just made first contact with an alien race." Jake felt his heart beat faster. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries. Meeting another intelligent species would change everything for the human race. "Send a message to the colony," he told his communications officer. "Tell Elena Rodriguez what's happening, and ask her to prepare the diplomatic team." Elena was the civilian leader of New Haven, and a smart woman who knew how to handle difficult situations. She had helped thousands of families settle on the new world, and everyone trusted her judgment. Ben Tucker, their chief engineer, was already working on ways to make the colony systems work better every day. The alien ships appeared on the main screen 2 hours later. They were long and silver with strange curves that seemed to flow like water. Blue lights pulsed along their hulls in patterns that looked almost like breathing. Jake had never seen anything so beautiful and frightening at the same time. "They're sending us a signal," the communications officer reported. "It's not radio waves, though. Some kind of bioelectric pulse pattern." Lisa moved to her science station and began working on the signal. "I can translate part of it," she said after a few minutes. "They call themselves the Zephyrian Empire. The lead ship carries someone called War Commander HFY. They want to meet with us." Jake made his decision quickly. "Invite them to the colony for a diplomatic meeting. Set it up in the main conference hall where we can accommodate their needs." He turned to Rick. "I want security teams ready, but keep them hidden. We don't want to look hostile." The alien shuttle landed near the colony 3 hours later. It was smaller than the big ships, but still twice the size of any human transport. The metal hull seemed to shift colors in the sunlight. When the door opened, 3 tall figures stepped out. The Zephyrians were unlike anything Jake had imagined. They stood 7 feet tall with blue-gray skin that sparkled with tiny electric currents. Their faces were angular with large eyes that glowed with inner light. They wore flowing robes that seemed to be made of living metal. War Commander HFY led the group into the conference hall. Elena Rodriguez and Dr. Carter were waiting with the diplomatic team. Jake stayed close by with Rick and several security officers dressed as regular colonists. "Welcome to New Haven," Elena said in her most friendly voice. "We are honored to meet you." She stepped forward and extended her hand in the traditional human greeting. Everything went wrong in that moment. HFY saw the extended hand and made a sound like breaking glass. The other Zephyrians moved backward and began making rapid bioelectric pulses that lit up their skin like lightning. Their large eyes turned bright red and they started speaking in their own language, with voices that sounded like storms. "What's happening?" Elena asked. She kept her hand extended but looked confused and worried. Lisa was working frantically on her translator. "I think the hand gesture means something different to them," she said. "In their culture, extending an open hand toward someone is a challenge to fight. They think Elena just declared war on them." HFY pulled out a weapon that looked like a crystal rod. Energy began building up inside it with a sound like singing metal. The other Zephyrians did the same. "Humans have violated sacred space," HFY said in broken English. Now humans challenge Zephyrian might. This means war. Rick and his security team moved fast, but the aliens were faster. Blue energy beams shot across the room and hit the walls behind the humans. The beams left burning holes in the metal. Elena dove for cover behind the conference table. Lisa grabbed her equipment and ran for the exit. "Wait," Jake shouted. "This is a misunderstanding. We don't want to fight." But the Zephyrians were already moving toward their shuttle. HFY turned back and pointed the crystal weapon at Jake. "Humans will learn," the war commander said. "Zephyrian Empire has ruled this space for 1,000 years. No primitive species challenges us in lives." The weapon charged up with deadly light. Jake rolled to the side as the energy beam burned through the air where he had been standing. The aliens reached their shuttle and took off within seconds. As the craft rose into the sky, Jake could see the massive warships moving closer to the planet. Elena got to her feet and dusted off her clothes. "Well, that could have gone better," she said. But her attempt at humor couldn't hide the fear in her voice. Rick was already talking into his communication device. "All defense teams to stations. This is not a drill. Hostile aliens are approaching the planet." He looked at Jake with grim eyes. "Our mining lasers and basic shields won't stop those ships if they decide to attack." The first energy beams hit the colony 20 minutes later. The Zephyrian ships had powerful weapons that could burn through buildings like paper. The humans had only basic defenses meant to protect against space debris and solar storms. Ben Tucker worked desperately to boost the shield generators, but they were never designed for combat. The colony's people ran for the underground shelters as explosions shook the ground above them. Jake watched from the command center as half of New Haven burned under alien fire. "They're setting up a blockade," Rick reported. "No ships can get in or out of the system." He paused and looked at the damage reports. "We're trapped here with limited supplies and no way to call for help." Jake looked at the faces around him. These people had traveled across the galaxy to build a new home, and now they were fighting for their lives because of a simple misunderstanding. But he could see something in their eyes that the aliens probably didn't expect. The humans were scared, but they were not broken. They were ready to fight back with everything they had. The USS Horizon was damaged but still flying. The colony was hurt but not destroyed. Most importantly, the human spirit was still strong. Jake knew that this war was just beginning, but he also knew that his people would never give up. They had come too far to quit now. 6 weeks had passed since the Zephyrians attacked New Haven. The surface of the colony was a wasteland of burned buildings and smoking craters. Alien patrols moved through the ruins while their ships circled overhead like metal vultures. But deep underground in the mining tunnels, the human spirit refused to die. Dr. Amy Walsh worked by the light of portable lamps in what used to be a storage room. Now it served as her hospital where she treated the wounded with whatever supplies she could find. Amy had been a colony doctor before the war started. Now she was performing miracles every day with nothing but determination and skill. "How is he doing?" asked Tony Martinez as he looked down at the injured miner on the makeshift bed. Tony had been a Marine before coming to New Haven to work in the mines. When the aliens attacked, he became the leader of the human resistance. His face was dirty and tired, but his eyes still burned with the fire of someone who refused to quit. "He'll live," Amy said as she finished bandaging the man's burns. "But we're running low on medical supplies again. The next raid needs to target one of their supply depots." She looked up at Tony with worried eyes. "We can't keep this up much longer without more medicine." Tony nodded and walked to the next room where Chloe Williams sat surrounded by communication equipment. Chloe had been the colony's main communications officer before the attack. Now she used her skills to listen to alien radio traffic and coordinate between the different groups of survivors hiding in the tunnels. "Any word from the northern sector?" Tony asked. The tunnel system stretched for miles under the colony and housed nearly 30,000 survivors in dozens of hidden camps. "Greg Stone reports that the hydroponic farms are still working," Chloe replied. "He's managed to keep the food growing even with limited power. The aliens haven't found the deep agricultural tunnels yet." She paused and adjusted her headset. "Nathan Brooks wants to talk to you about his latest explosive devices." Nathan had been a construction worker who specialized in demolitions before the war. Now he used his knowledge of explosives to create weapons from mining equipment and industrial chemicals. His bombs were crude but effective against Zephyrian patrols. Tony found Nathan in a workshop that had been carved out of solid rock. The former construction worker was bent over a workbench assembling another improvised explosive device. "These new ones are better," Nathan said without looking up. "I figured out how to make them more powerful using the alien power cells we captured last week." "How many do you have ready?" Tony asked. He was planning another raid on a Zephyrian supply convoy and needed all the firepower he could get. 12 bombs that can take out an alien transport," Nathan replied. "Plus 20, smaller ones for taking down communication arrays." He finally looked up from his work. "The aliens still don't understand how we keep hitting them. They expect us to fight like they're other enemies with big armies and fancy weapons." Tony smiled for the first time in days. The Zephyrians were having trouble with human tactics because they had never fought an enemy like this before. Their empire had conquered dozens of worlds using the same strategies over and over. They would land their forces, destroy the enemy military, and then occupy the planet. But humans didn't fight that way. The resistance used hit-and-run tactics that confused the aliens. Small teams would attack supply convoys using homemade explosives and then disappear into the tunnels before the enemy could respond. They sabotaged communication equipment and power generators. They spread false information that made the aliens suspicious of their own troops. Chloe's voice came over the tunnel communication system. "Tony, you need to get up here. I'm picking up something important on the alien frequencies." Tony ran back to the communications room where Chloe was working, frantically at her equipment. "What did you find?" he asked. "The aliens are having problems with their technology," she said with excitement in her voice. "Their weapons and shields aren't working as well as they should. Listen to this." She played back a recording of Zephyrian radio traffic that her computer had translated. The alien voices sounded frustrated and angry. They were reporting equipment failures and power losses across their forces. Their energy weapons were losing effectiveness and their shields were becoming unstable. "Why is this happening?" Tony asked. He didn't understand alien technology, but he knew an opportunity when he saw one. Chloe called up Greg Stone on the communication system. Greg's voice came through the speakers, sounding tired but excited. "I think I know what's causing their problems," he said. "When we sabotaged the atmospheric processors last week, we changed the air composition in this region. The alien technology seems to need specific atmospheric conditions to work properly." Tony felt hope rising in his chest for the first time since the attack began. "Can we make it worse for them?" "Maybe," Greg replied. "If we can hit more atmospheric processors and modify their output, we might be able to create environmental conditions that will seriously damage their equipment effectiveness." Tony gathered his team leaders for an emergency meeting in the main tunnel junction. Amy left her patients long enough to attend. Nathan brought his explosives. Chloe set up a communication link with Greg and the other sector leaders. "We have a chance to hurt them badly," Tony told the group, "but it will require coordinating attacks across the entire colony at the same time. Every team will need to hit their targets within the same hour." Amy spoke up first. "My medical teams can help with diversionary attacks. We know the tunnel system better than anyone, and we can guide the strike teams to their targets." Nathan was already making calculations in his head. "I'll need 3 days to prepare enough explosives for simultaneous attacks on 12 atmospheric processors. But we can do it." Chloe nodded from her communication station. "I can coordinate the timing between all teams. The aliens won't know what hit them." Greg's voice came through the speakers. "Once we modify the atmospheric processors, their equipment should start failing within hours. But they'll also know exactly what we did and they'll be angry." "Let them be angry," Tony said. "We've been hiding in these tunnels long enough. It's time to show these aliens what humans are really capable of." The next 3 days were the busiest since the siege began. Every able person in the tunnels worked to prepare for the coordinated assault. Nathan and his demolition teams built dozens of bombs. Amy organized medical support for the strike teams. Chloe established communication links with every sector, of the Resistance. On the morning of the attack, Tony led his team through maintenance tunnels toward the Central Atmospheric Processing Plant. This was the most heavily guarded target, but also the most important. If they could take it out, the atmospheric changes would affect the largest area. The team moved through darkness using night vision equipment salvaged from the colony's mining operations. They could hear alien patrols moving overhead, but the tunnels were too small for the tall Zephyrians to follow. This was human territory now. Nathan placed his charges on the main processing units while Tony's fighters watched for guards. Chloe's voice whispered through their radio headsets. All teams report ready. Strike in 30 seconds. Tony watched the timer count down on his wrist display. When it reached 0, explosions echoed across the colony as 12 atmospheric processors exploded simultaneously. The air itself began to change as the modified systems pumped out gases that would make Zephyrian technology unstable. The response was immediate and terrible. Alien ships began bombing the surface randomly, while ground troops searched frantically for the human tunnels. But their weapons were already becoming less accurate as the atmospheric changes took effect. "It's working," Chloe reported over the radio. Alien communications are becoming garbled and their energy shields are fluctuating. But the victory came with a price. The random bombing was getting closer to the tunnel entrances, and the aliens were bringing in heavy equipment to dig. For the human hideouts, Tony knew they had bought time and damaged the enemy, but the war was far from over. As he led his team back through the tunnels, Tony thought about the people counting on him. 50,000 humans had come to New Haven to build a better life. Now they were fighting for survival against an enemy that had conquered the galaxy, but they were still fighting, and that was what mattered. The human spirit could not be broken by superior technology or overwhelming odds. It could bend and adapt and find ways to fight back that no alien empire would ever understand. The Zephyrians had made a mistake when they attacked New Haven. They had awakened something in humanity that would not go back to sleep. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty and stared at the tactical display showing the New Haven system. Her relief fleet had taken 3 months to reach the besieged colony, but what she saw on the screens made her heart sink. 12 Zephyrian battleships surrounded the planet while smaller patrol craft hunted for human survivors on the surface. "The colony is still transmitting resistance signals," reported Dr. Marcus Hill from his science station. Marcus was a specialist in alien psychology who had spent years studying how different species thought and fought. "The underground networks are active and coordinated. These people haven't given up." Sergeant Linda Fox checked her equipment one more time. Linda was a Special Forces operative who had volunteered for the most dangerous missions during her 10 years of military service. "Admiral, my team is ready to infiltrate the planet and make contact with the Resistance. We can gather intelligence and coordinate our attack with their operations." Carlos Vega looked up from his diplomatic station. Carlos had negotiated peace treaties between hostile Earth nations before joining the space service. "I've been analyzing signals from other parts of the galaxy. The Zephyrian Empire is fighting rebellions on at least 6 other worlds. News of the human resistance has spread and inspired other species to fight back." Admiral Sullivan nodded but kept her eyes on the tactical display. The Zephyrian fleet was positioned perfectly to destroy any approaching ships. Her forces were outnumbered 3-1, and the enemy had superior technology. But she had learned something important about humanity during her career. Numbers and technology didn't always determine the winner of a battle. "Jim Parker, are you ready for your mission?" she asked the pilot sitting at the experimental fighter controls. Jim was the best pilot in the Earth Defense Force and the only person qualified to fly the new stealth ship. "Ghostwing is ready for launch," Jim replied. His fighter was built with human engineering that emphasized adaptability over raw power. The ship could change its energy signature and become nearly invisible to alien sensors. "I can get past their patrols and reach the planet's surface." Dr. Hill had been studying captured Zephyrian technology for months. "Admiral, I think I've found their weakness. The Zephyrian Empire has conquered hundreds of worlds using the same tactics over and over. They rely on rigid hierarchical command structures and standardized battle plans. They've never faced an enemy that fights the way humans do. Explain, Admiral Sullivan said. She needed every advantage she could find against the superior alien force. Their entire military doctrine is based on predictability, Marcus continued. Each species they've conquered has followed logical military responses to their attacks. The Zephyrians have detailed plans for every possible enemy reaction. But humans don't fight logically. We adapt and improvise and do things that don't make sense to their way of thinking. Sergeant Fox was already planning her infiltration mission. If their command structure is rigid, then we can exploit that. Small disruptions at key points could create major confusion throughout their forces. She looked at her team of volunteers. We specialize in making the impossible look easy. Carlos had been monitoring communications from across the galaxy. Admiral, I'm receiving signals from a species called the Karathi. They were conquered by the Zephyrians 300 years ago, but they've maintained a secret resistance movement. They want to coordinate with us. This was the breakthrough Admiral Sullivan had been hoping for. Open a channel. Let's see what they have to offer. The main screen flickered and showed a reptilian face with intelligent golden eyes. The creature spoke in accented English that had been learned from intercepted human transmissions. I am Karathi Commander Susthak. We have watched humans fight against the Empire. Your people do things that should be impossible. We wish to learn from you. What can you tell us about Zephyrian weaknesses? Admiral Sullivan asked. They fear chaos above all things, Susthak replied. For 1,000 years they have won by imposing order on every battlefield. But humans bring chaos wherever they go. Their commanders cannot adapt when their plans fail. Jim Parker launched Ghostwing an hour later. The small fighter slipped past the Zephyrian patrols using stealth technology that confused their sensors. The aliens expected attacking ships to announce themselves with energy signatures and weapon locks. Jim's ship did neither, and became effectively invisible. He reached the planet's surface and made contact with the human resistance. Tony Martinez met him at a hidden landing site in the northern mountains. We've been holding out for 3 months, Tony reported. The aliens control the surface, but we own the underground. They can't figure out how to fight us. Jim smiled as he looked at the determination in Tony's eyes. Admiral Sullivan has a plan, but she needs your people to coordinate with our attack. Can you hit their ground installations when we engage their fleet? We've been preparing for something like this, Tony replied. Dr. Amy Walsh has medical teams ready to treat casualties. Nathan Brooks has enough explosives to level half their installations. Chloe Williams can coordinate timing with your fleet operations. Meanwhile, Sergeant Fox and her team had infiltrated a Zephyrian command post using tactics that baffled the alien guards. The Zephyrians expected infiltrators to use advanced technology and careful planning. Instead, Fox's team simply walked through the front entrance disguised as maintenance workers and caused chaos from within. They didn't steal information or sabotage equipment. Instead, they spread false rumors and created fake orders that exploited the aliens' rigid command structure. Soon, Zephyrian units were receiving contradictory instructions and questioning their own intelligence networks. Carlos Vega was busy establishing communication with resistance movements across the galaxy. The Karathi shared intelligence about Zephyrian fleet movements. A species called the Nexari offered their telepathic abilities for coordinated attacks. The Vorthons provided engineering expertise for building better weapons. It's working, Carlos reported to Admiral Sullivan. The Empire is fighting simultaneous rebellions on 17 worlds now. They're having to split their forces and abandon some territories entirely. Dr. Hill made another crucial discovery while analyzing enemy communications. The Zephyrians are starting to doubt their own superiority. For the first time in their history, they're facing enemies they can't predict or control. Their confidence is shaking. Admiral Sullivan saw her opportunity and ordered the attack. The human fleet approached the Zephyrian forces using unconventional tactics that violated every rule of space combat. Instead of maintaining formation, her ships scattered in seemingly random patterns that confused enemy targeting systems. Jim Parker's Ghostwing led the assault by appearing behind enemy lines without warning. His ship wasn't powerful enough to damage the alien battleships, but it didn't need to be. He simply existed where he shouldn't be able to exist and forced the Zephyrians to question their own sensors. On the planet's surface, Tony Martinez coordinated simultaneous attacks on 12 different targets. The resistance hit power stations, communication arrays, and supply depots, using tactics that had been refined during months of guerrilla warfare. The aliens found themselves fighting enemies who appeared from nowhere and vanished into tunnels, too small for pursuit. The Battle of New Haven lasted 18 hours. When it ended, 3 Zephyrian battleships had been destroyed, and the rest were retreating toward the outer system. But more importantly, the psychological impact spread across the galaxy faster than any physical victory could have. Admiral Sullivan received reports from Carlos about uprisings on 40 different worlds. The Zephyrian Empire was facing the first serious challenge to their power in 1,000 years, and they didn't know how to respond. The resistance movements are asking for human military advisors, Carlos reported. They want to learn our tactics and fighting methods. Dr. Hill was analyzing the psychological impact of the victory. We've shown the galaxy that the Zephyrians can be beaten. More importantly, we've shown them how to fight in ways the Empire can't counter. Sergeant Fox and her team had caused so much confusion in the enemy command structure that some Zephyrian units were still receiving contradictory orders days after the battle ended. Their rigid hierarchy is working against them, she reported. They're so used to following orders without question that they can't adapt when those orders don't make sense. As Admiral Sullivan looked at the tactical displays showing Zephyrian forces in retreat, she realized that this war had become something bigger than just saving one human colony. It had become a galactic revolution led by a species that refused to accept defeat. The human spirit had proven unbreakable once again, but more than that, it had become contagious. Species across the galaxy were learning that they didn't have to accept oppression. They could fight back using methods that their oppressors couldn't understand or counter. The war was far from over, but the tide had turned. Humanity had gone from victims to leaders in just a few months. They had shown the galaxy that technological superiority meant nothing against determination, creativity, and the refusal to surrender. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled through fear and overwhelming force for a millennium. Now they faced something they had never encountered before. General Sam Wright studied the holographic battle map floating above the command table aboard the Coalition flagship. Red dots showed Zephyrian strongholds while blue markers indicated liberated worlds across the galaxy. The war had spread to over 60 star systems, and humanity was leading the largest rebellion in galactic history. The Nexari telepathic network reports successful coordination of attacks in the Outer Rim, said Maya Singh from her intelligence station. Maya had become the Coalition's primary intelligence coordinator, linking resistance movements across dozens of species. The Zephyrians lost 4 supply bases in the last week alone. Dr. Rachel Kim looked up from her research console where she had been working on defensive technologies. Rachel had combined human adaptive engineering with alien materials science to create breakthroughs that were changing the balance of power. General, the new shield generators are ready for deployment. They can adjust their frequencies in real time to counter Zephyrian weapons. Commander Alex Torres walked over from the tactical station where he had been planning the next phase of operations. Alex had revolutionized space combat by abandoning traditional formation flying in favor of chaotic attack patterns. The swarm tactics are working better than expected. Our smaller fleets are consistently defeating larger Zephyrian forces. Paul Anderson was coordinating with alien engineers to build hybrid technologies that combined the best aspects of different species' capabilities. The Vorthan engineering teams have completed modifications to our ships. The new propulsion systems will let us move twice as fast while using half the energy. General Wright nodded as he processed the reports. 6 months ago, humanity had been fighting for survival on one besieged world. Now they were leading a galactic coalition that was winning victories across known space. The transformation seemed impossible, but it was happening because humans brought something unique to warfare. Status report on the Karathi operations, Wright asked Maya. The reptilian species had become humanity's closest allies, and their natural camouflage abilities were perfect for infiltration missions. Commander Sesthak reports that his teams have successfully infiltrated 3 Zephyrian command centers, Maya replied. They're using the psychological warfare techniques that Sergeant Fox developed. The enemy command structure is becoming increasingly paranoid and ineffective. Dr. Kim had made her most important discovery while studying captured Zephyrian equipment. General, I've figured out why their technology is so vulnerable to our atmospheric modifications. Their energy systems are designed for perfect efficiency in controlled environments. When conditions become unpredictable, their equipment can't adapt. Unlike human technology, Commander Torres added with a smile, our equipment is designed to work even when everything goes wrong. We expect chaos and plan for it. Paul Anderson had been working with Vorthon scientists to understand the fundamental differences between human and Zephyrian engineering philosophies. The aliens build systems that work perfectly under ideal conditions. We build systems that work adequately under any conditions. When the environment becomes hostile, our technology keeps functioning while theirs fails. This insight had led to the development of new weapons and defenses that could operate in conditions that would shut down Zephyrian equipment. Human engineers had learned to create technology that thrived on unpredictability rather than being crippled by it. Maya's intelligence network had discovered something even more important than technological advantages. General, the psychological impact of our victories is spreading faster than our military advances. Zephyrian morale is collapsing on worlds we haven't even attacked yet. Explain, Wright said. He had learned that understanding enemy psychology was often more important than understanding their technology. The Zephyrian Empire has maintained control for 1,000 years by convincing everyone that resistance is futile, Maya continued. They've built their power on the belief that they're invincible. Every time we win a battle, we prove that belief is false. Commander Torres had seen this effect during the Battle of Kepler Station. Their commanders are making increasingly desperate decisions. They're abandoning proven tactics and trying strategies that make no sense. Fear is making them irrational. Dr. Kim had been analyzing Zephyrian communication intercepts and found evidence of growing panic among their leadership. They're requesting reinforcements from the core worlds, but those reinforcements are needed to fight other rebellions. The Empire is being stretched beyond its ability to respond effectively. The Coalition's greatest victory came at the Battle of Zephyr Secundus, a major industrial world that supplied the Empire's war machine. General Wright had coordinated the attack using every species' unique abilities under human strategic leadership. The Karathi infiltrated the planet's defenses using their natural camouflage. The Nexari provided telepathic communication that couldn't be intercepted by enemy surveillance. The Vorthons contributed superior engineering for siege weapons. Humans provided the overall strategy and the willingness to take risks that seemed insane to more logical species. The attack plan violates every principle of military science, said the Vorthon chief engineer during the planning session. It has too many variables and too many opportunities for failure. That's exactly why it will work, General Wright replied. The Zephyrians have detailed plans for countering logical attacks. They have no plans for countering insane attacks. The battle began with Paul Anderson's hybrid ships using swarm tactics to confuse the orbital defenses. The Zephyrian fleet tried to respond with standard formation flying, but found themselves unable to target ships that moved in seemingly random patterns. Meanwhile, Maya Singh coordinated intelligence operations that fed false information to enemy commanders. The Zephyrians received reports of massive human fleets approaching from 3 different directions simultaneously. Their response was to split their forces and weaken their defenses everywhere. Dr. Kim's adaptive shield generators proved their worth when Zephyrian weapons began losing effectiveness against targets that constantly changed their defensive frequencies. The aliens had never faced an enemy whose defenses evolved in real time during combat. Commander Torres led the final assault using tactics that should have been suicide. His forces approached the planet's surface in small groups that appeared to be fleeing rather than attacking. When the Zephyrian defenders moved to pursue what they thought were scattered survivors, they found themselves surrounded by coalition forces that had used apparent retreat as an attack formation. The victory at Zephyr Secundus had consequences that reached far beyond one star system. The industrial world had been considered impregnable, and its fall sent shockwaves through the Empire. More importantly, it proved that human leadership could coordinate massive multi-species operations more effectively than Zephyrian commanders could respond. Intelligence reports indicate revolution on the core worlds themselves, Maya announced during the post-battle briefing. Species that were considered completely loyal to the Empire are rising up. The Zephyrian government is losing control of their own territory. But the Coalition's success came with a terrible price. As they approached the Zephyr Prime system, home to the Empire's capital world, long-range sensors detected something that made everyone's blood run cold. "General, you need to see this," Dr. Kim said from her science station. Her voice was tight, with fear as she displayed the sensor readings on the main screen. The image showed a massive structure orbiting Zephyr Prime. It was 10 times larger than the biggest Zephyrian battleship and crackling with energy that made their most powerful weapons look like toys. The thing was obviously artificial, but built on a scale that dwarfed anything the Coalition had ever seen. "What are we looking at?" General Wright asked, although he suspected he didn't want to know the answer. Paul Anderson was running calculations on his engineering console. The energy signature suggests some kind of planetary bombardment weapon. If I'm reading this correctly, that thing could destroy an entire world. Maya's intelligence networks had been trying to gather information about the mysterious weapon, but even their best sources had never heard of it. The Zephyrians have kept this completely secret. None of the resistance movements knew it existed. Commander Torres was already running tactical simulations, but the results were not encouraging. "Our fleets couldn't get close enough to attack it. The defensive systems around Zephyr Prime would destroy us long before we could engage the weapon." Kim was analyzing the energy patterns, and her findings were even more disturbing. "General, based on these readings, I think the weapon is targeted at Earth. The Zephyrians are planning to destroy humanity's homeworld unless we surrender unconditionally." The mood in the command center turned grim as the implications sank. The Coalition had been winning the war, but now faced a threat that could end human civilization with a single shot. All their victories would mean nothing if Earth was turned to ash. "How long until the weapon is ready to fire?" General Wright asked. 48 hours, Dr. Kim replied. "Maybe less." General Wright looked at the faces around him. These people had followed human leadership across the galaxy and won impossible victories through determination and ingenuity. President Diana Ross stood in the emergency command center deep beneath the Earth's capital city and stared at the message from General Wright. The Zephyrian planet killer weapon was charging up and would be ready to fire at Earth in less than 40 hours. The choice was simple and terrible: surrender unconditionally or watch humanity's homeworld burn. "Ma'am, we're receiving surrender demands from the Zephyrian High Command," reported her communications officer. "They want our complete withdrawal from all contested systems and the dissolution of the Coalition. In exchange, they promised to spare Earth." Dr. Helen Price looked up from her physics console where she had been analyzing the weapon data sent by the Coalition fleet. Helen was Earth's leading expert on exotic energy systems and the only person who might understand how the alien weapon worked. "Madam President, I think I found something important about this planet killer." "Tell me," Diana said. She had been elected to lead humanity during peacetime, but now she faced decisions that would determine whether her species survived. "The weapon operates by creating a chain reaction in a planet's core," Helen explained. "It fires a concentrated beam that destabilizes matter at the subatomic level. The effect spreads through the planet until the entire world collapses in on itself." Colonel Mike Freeman stepped forward from where he had been coordinating with military leaders around the world. Mike commanded Earth's elite marine forces and had volunteered to lead any ground operations that might be needed. "Is there a way to stop it?" Helen nodded, but her expression remained grim. "The weapon has to drop its defensive shields for 17 seconds while it charges for the final shot. During that window, a small ship could theoretically get close enough to destroy the main power coupling, but it would be a suicide mission through the most heavily defended space in the galaxy." Lieutenant Commander Sarah Davis had been listening from her position at the tactical display. Sarah was young but had already proven herself as one of Earth's most capable officers during the war. "Madam President, if someone could get close enough during that 17-second window, would it definitely destroy the weapon?" "The explosion would be visible from neighboring star systems," Helen replied. But the ship carrying the explosives wouldn't survive. The energy release would vaporize anything within 1,000 kilometers. President Ross looked around the room, at the faces of her advisors. These people represented the best of humanity, and they were all looking to her for an impossible decision. She could surrender and save Earth but condemn every liberated world to return to Zephyrian slavery. Or she could refuse and watch her home world die in nuclear fire. "There's a third option," she said finally. "We don't surrender and we don't let Earth burn. We destroy that weapon." Captain Steve Johnson stepped forward from where he had been standing with the other ship commanders. Steve was a veteran of dozens of space battles and had volunteered for the most dangerous missions throughout the war. "Madam President, I'll take the USS Defiance on the suicide run. My crew and I have already discussed it, and we're ready." "Steve, you're talking about flying into the teeth of the most powerful fleet in the galaxy," Colonel Freeman said. "The defensive systems around Zephyr Prime would destroy 100 ships before one could get through." "Then we send more than 100 ships," Sarah Davis said quietly. Everyone turned to look at the young officer. "We send every ship we have. Some will get through." Dr. Price was running calculations on her computer. "If we strip all non-essential systems from our fastest ships and load them with the most powerful explosives we can build, we might have a chance, but the casualties would be enormous." President Ross made her decision. "Send a message to General Wright. Tell him we're not surrendering. Tell him we're sending everything we have to destroy that weapon." She paused and looked around the room. "And tell him that if we fail, the human spirit will live on in the colonies even if Earth doesn't." 24 hours later, Captain Johnson stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance and watched his volunteer crew make final preparations. The ship had been stripped of everything except engines, life support, and the largest explosive device humanity had ever built. 300 other ships were making similar preparations across the solar system. "All ships report ready," came the voice of Admiral Sullivan over the communication system. Kate had returned to Earth to coordinate the desperate mission. "Remember, this isn't about survival. This is about proving that the human spirit cannot be broken by any threat." Meanwhile, Colonel Freeman was leading a simultaneous ground assault on Zephyr Prime itself. His forces, a mix of human Marines and coalition species, had to capture the weapons control centers to prevent the Zephyrians from simply building another planet killer. "The Karathi infiltration teams are in position," reported Maya Singh from the Coalition command ship. "Commander Susthak confirms that his people have reached the primary control facility. Dr. Kim's adaptive technology had been installed on every ship in the human fleet. The new shield generators are synchronized across all vessels. When the Zephyrian defenses target one ship, all ships in the area will share the defensive load." Commander Torres had developed a final evolution of his swarm tactics for this mission. "The attack pattern is completely random. Our ships will approach from every possible angle at different speeds and different times. The enemy can't prepare for chaos." Paul Anderson had worked with alien engineers to create hybrid explosives that combined the destructive power of every species in the coalition. Each ship carries enough firepower to level a city. If even one gets through, the weapon dies. The human fleet jumped into the Zephyr Prime system 36 hours after receiving the surrender ultimatum. The Zephyrian defenses opened fire immediately with energy weapons that could destroy a battleship with a single shot. The first wave of human ships died within minutes, but more ships kept coming. The second wave arrived from a different direction, while the third wave approached at maximum speed from above the orbital plane. The Zephyrian defenders found themselves facing attacks from every direction simultaneously. Captain Johnson watched dozens of ships die around him, but kept the Defiance on course toward the planet-killer weapon. His crew worked calmly at their stations despite knowing they had only minutes to live. "Engineering, give me everything the engines have. Weapons, target the main power coupling." The USS Defiance was one of 15 ships that survived long enough to reach the weapon's defensive perimeter. 12 more died to the close-in defense systems. 2 ships collided with debris from earlier casualties. That left only Captain Johnson's ship approaching the target as the planet killer began its final charging sequence. 17 seconds, his science officer announced. "The weapon is dropping shields now." Steve Johnson had spent his entire adult life serving humanity among the stars. He had seen Earth from space countless times and knew exactly what he was trying to save. All crew to emergency stations. This is for everyone back home. The Defiance accelerated to ramming speed as Zephyrian fighters tried desperately to intercept. Johnson's ship had been built for this one moment and nothing could stop it now. The explosive device in the cargo bay contained the concentrated fury of every liberated world in the galaxy. The explosion lit up the Zephyr Prime system like a new star. The planet-killer weapon vanished in a ball of nuclear fire that could be seen from neighboring systems. The shockwave destroyed half the Zephyrian orbital defenses and crippled their remaining fleet. On the planet's surface, Colonel Freeman's forces captured the weapon control centers just as the explosion occurred. Overhead, the Marines and their alien allies had fought through the capital city, using tactics that had been refined during months of warfare against Zephyrian forces. "The weapon is gone," Freeman reported to Earth. Captain Johnson succeeded. The threat to Earth is eliminated, but the most important victory happened in the mind of War Commander HFY. As he watched his ultimate weapon die, the Zephyrian leader had spent his entire life believing that superior technology and overwhelming force could conquer any enemy. The humans had just proven him wrong. "How can they do this?" HFY asked his advisors as he watched the tactical displays showing human ships dying by the dozens to destroy his planet killer. "They must know they cannot win. Why do they not surrender?" His science advisor had been studying human behavior throughout the war. "Commander, I believe they would rather die fighting than live as slaves. This is completely irrational by our standards." "Perhaps," HFY said quietly. "Or perhaps we have been the irrational ones." The war commander contacted General Wright on an open channel. The human general appeared on the main screen looking tired but undefeated, despite the massive casualties. His forces had just suffered. "General Wright, I wish to discuss terms of surrender," HFY said. Wright's expression didn't change. "Whose surrender?" "The Zephyrian Empire yields to the coalition forces," HFY replied. "We cannot fight an enemy that values freedom more than life itself. You have taught us that technology means nothing against an unbreakable spirit." 5 years later, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Davis stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt New Haven colony and watched children of a dozen different species playing together in the gardens.